The air in the emergency room at Metropolitan General was a living, breathing entity, humming with the raw energy of desperation and defiance. It clung to the back of your throat, a mix of antiseptic, fear, and the metallic scent of blood that no ventilation system could fully dispel. For Dr. Evelyn Reed, it was the only air she truly knew how to breathe anymore, the constant demand for her skills a shield against the echoes of a life brutally cut short. 28 hours into her shift, fatigue was a lead weight in her limbs, a persistent ache behind her eyes, but her mind was sharp, honed by years in the crucible of high-stakes trauma surgery. The ER was a storm she had learned to navigate, finding a strange, hard-won peace in its eye. Her past was a foreign country she rarely visited, its landscape dominated by a single imposing figure, Liam Vance, CEO of Vance Corp., a name that commanded respect, fear, and billions. He had been her husband. For 6 years, she had lived in his world, a world of soaring glass towers, hushed power lunches, and glittering social events where fortunes were made and lost with a handshake. She had been the elegant, intelligent wife, the discreet support system, believing with fierce conviction in the shared future they were building. She had seen the man beneath the tailored suits, the drive, yes, but also the rare moments of vulnerability, the ambition tempered, she had thought, by a genuine connection. The connection, it turned out, was a luxury Liam Vance could no longer afford. Vance Corp was poised for a monumental expansion, a merger that would redefine global markets. The key was the Du Bois empire, old money, vast, entrenched power. The alliance required union. His union with Celeste Du Bois, the sole heiress. Evelyn was extraneous, obsolete. The conversation, delivered with the polite finality of a termination notice in their sprawling, impersonal living room, had stripped her bare. Divorce, a generous settlement offered, enough to ensure a life of comfortable, isolated anonymity. She had refused. The very idea felt like accepting payment for her discarded self. She had walked away with nothing but her medical license, her pride, and a wound that went bone deep, a constant, dull ache beneath her breastbone. She poured herself into surgery, the grueling hours of penance, a purification, a way to rebuild herself from the ground up. Every life saved, every body pieced back together, was a small, silent victory. She became relentless, precise, gaining a reputation for her unshakable calm in the face of chaos. Dr. Evelyn Reed. Her name, earned through sweat, skill, and sheer, unadulterated will, was her fortress. Tonight, the city outside was a landscape of flashing blue and red lights, a symphony of wailing sirens responding to a catastrophic pileup on the main elevated freeway. Dense fog, compounded by an overturned chemical tanker releasing noxious fumes, had turned the multi-lane highway into a scene of unimaginable horror. The ER was overwhelmed, a war zone of trauma and desperate urgency. Every bay was full, hallways lined with stretchers, the air thick with the acrid smell of chemicals, the sharp metallic scent of fresh blood, and the underlying current of fear. Evelyn was coordinating the intake of multiple critical patients in the main triage area. Her focus narrowed to the immediate task at hand. Then, the main entrance doors blew open, letting in a blast of cold night air and a wave of urgent shouting that cut through the general din like a physical force. Security personnel materialized instantly, clearing a path. Paramedics ran, pushing a gurney, surrounded by a swarm of medical personnel and security, their faces grim, their movements frantic. Confirmed priority 0 inbound. Armored limousine, Du Bois Industries plates. Forced off the bridge. Major structural compromise. Occupant, Celeste Du Bois. Severe multi-system trauma, GCS fluctuating, possible complete cervical spine injury. Witness reports, deliberate ramming, high-speed pursuit. ETA 1 minute. Celeste Du Bois. The name resonated through the ER, a shockwave that momentarily silenced the immediate area. The heiress, Liam's wife, the woman who had replaced her. Evelyn's blood ran cold, a primal jolt of shock and grotesque irony. Celeste, here, catastrophically injured, brought to her hospital, into her world, into her hands. It was a twist of fate so brutal, so profoundly absurd, it felt unreal. The woman who embodied the life Evelyn had lost was now entirely dependent on the skills Evelyn had honed in the aftermath of that loss. Seconds later, the gurney was wheeled in, a focal point of chaos, security personnel pushing back onlookers, doctors and nurses converging. Even through the blood and trauma, the woman on the gurney was instantly recognizable, a face from magazine covers and society pages, a symbol of the world Evelyn had been cast out of. Patient ID confirmed. Celeste Du Bois. Severe head injury, possible C1, C2 fracture, unstable vitals. Hypotensive, lost pulse en route, regained but unstable. The paramedic shouted, his voice strained, relaying the grim details. Behind the gurney, struggling against hospital staff and the throng of onlookers, a figure in a disheveled, expensive suit. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror, his tie askew, his usually immaculate hair mussed. Liam Vance. Their eyes met across the crowded, chaotic expanse of the ER. The noise of the hospital, the beeping monitors, the shouting voices, it all faded into a distant hum, a dull roar in the background. Time seemed to stretch, suspended in the charged space between them. Years of silence, of pain, of deliberate distance, of rebuilding, it all condensed into that single, agonizing glance. His eyes, wide and bloodshot, fixed first on Celeste, then snapped to Evelyn's. Shock, fear, desperation for his wife. Yes, but beneath it, something else flickered. Recognition, perhaps of the woman she had become, a raw vulnerability, a ghost of the man she had known, before the polished veneer of power had consumed him entirely. Celeste, he roared, his voice raw with anguish, pushing past a security guard trying to restrain him. What happened? My God! Is she all right? Tell me she's all right. Charge nurse Gloria Morales, a woman whose calm efficiency in a crisis was legendary, stepped forward, placing a firm hand on his chest to stop his progress towards Trauma Bay 1. Mr. Vance, you must step back. Your wife is in extremely critical condition. Dr. Reed and the trauma team are taking over. Please, the family waiting area is here. We will keep you informed as soon as we have an update. Liam stumbled back, his aura of corporate power completely shattered, replaced by the raw, unvarnished fear of a man facing a nightmare he could not control with wealth or influence. He kept looking at Evelyn, his eyes pleading, a silent, desperate communication passing between them. Evelyn forced herself to breathe, to compartmentalize. Later, the surreal shock of seeing him, of this patient, of the grotesque irony of the situation, could wait. Right now, Celeste Du Bois was a patient. A human life hanging by a thread, depending on her skill, on her team's expertise. Trauma Bay 1 clear. On my count, she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Regaining control, her focus narrowing to the grim task ahead. Rapid sequence intubation on my mark. Give me blood gas stat. Alert neuro and ortho. Prep or for immediate spinal decompression. Massive transfusion protocol on standby. She moved purposefully towards Trauma Bay 1, joining the team already swarming around Celeste. As she passed Liam, she didn't make eye contact, focusing solely on the patient, on the grim task ahead. She was Dr. Reed, the trauma surgeon. Her hands were needed. Personal history had no place here. The initial assessment in Trauma Bay 1 was a rapid-fire exchange of grim medical details amidst the flurry of activity. Severe closed head injury, GCS3, non-responsive. Pupillary response fixed and dilated, ominous signs. Clear indications of increased intracranial pressure. Suspected atlanto-occipital dislocation. Internal decapitation at the base of the skull. Possible severe internal injuries as well. The force of the impact, even through the armored plating of the limousine, had been immense, designed to be lethal. Detective Miller arrived quickly, a quiet, focused figure moving through the organized chaos. He conferred with the paramedics, his face hardening as he absorbed their report. Witnesses on the overpass before the fog completely enveloped the scene are consistent. Large truck specifically targeted the limo. High-speed impact. No attempt to brake. Just ramming speed. Then it fled into the fog bank. Stolen plates confirmed. Truck found torched 10 miles out. Professional accelerant use. Minimal forensic evidence left. He looked towards the waiting area where Liam and Victor Dubois, who had arrived moments before, stood in tense, hushed conversation with two burly men in dark suits. Victor's ever-present private security detail. This wasn't random. This was professional. A planned hit on Ms. Dubois. The chilling reality solidified, adding another layer of dread to the already tense atmosphere. Celeste Dubois wasn't a victim of a tragic traffic accident. She was the survivor of an attempted assassination. But why? Celeste was the public face of old money philanthropy, a socialite involved in high-profile charities, art foundations, and graceful social events. She was not known for having deadly enemies. Unless the target wasn't Celeste herself, but what she represented, or who she was married to. Liam. The high-stakes world of corporate power and vast fortunes. The pending Phoenix Technologies acquisition. As the medical team worked to stabilize Celeste for immediate CT scans and transfer to surgery, inserting lines, securing her airway, managing her dropping blood pressure, Evelyn caught Liam's eye through the glass of the bay. He was pacing relentlessly in the waiting area, running a hand through his hair, talking on his phone with frantic urgency. The casual arrogance she remembered was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate fear that seemed to consume him. Beside him, Victor Dubois stood like a statue carved from ice, his face a mask of grim control, but his eyes held a flicker of something else, fear, perhaps, or a terrible, dawning understanding of the forces at play. Hours bled into one another in the sterile intensity of the operating room. Celeste was rushed to the neurosurgical suite for a desperate, high-stakes attempt to decompress the brain and stabilize her shattered spine. Evelyn was scrubbed in, working alongside Dr. Lee, the chief of neurosurgery and the orthopedic team. The OR was a world of focused intensity, every sound, every movement significant. They worked in a strained, almost telepathic silence, punctuated only by the steady beeping of monitors and the hushed voices of the surgical team. Evelyn's hands moved with practiced skill, navigating the delicate landscape of bone and tissue, but in the back of her mind, the detective's words echoed. A professional hit on Celeste Dubois. Who would want her dead, and why? During a tense lull, as Dr. Lee worked on a particularly delicate cranial procedure to relieve pressure, Nurse Chun, a quiet, observant nurse who had been in the OR, leaned in slightly, her voice a low whisper meant only for Evelyn. Nurse Chun was known for her sharp eyes and quiet efficiency. Nothing escaped her notice. Dr. Reed, she murmured, her eyes darting towards the OR doors, a subtle unease in her tone. Security just reported some unusual activity on this floor. About an hour ago, a man, not staff, asking questions about patient transfers to the ICU, asking about a high-profile female patient from the accident, describing Ms. Dubois. He left when confronted, but he looked wrong. Out of place. Didn't look like family, didn't look like police. A cold knot formed in Evelyn's stomach, tightening with a sudden, sharp fear. They were here, inside the hospital. The threat wasn't just a past event confined to the overpass wreckage. It was a present danger, closing in, perhaps looking to ensure the job was finished. After what felt like an eternity, they completed the complex surgery. Celeste's spine was stabilized, the pressure on her brain relieved as much as possible. But the damage was profound. She was alive, but in a deep, unresponsive coma, her neurological function a terrifying unknown. She was transferred to the neurosurgical ICU, a highly secured unit with restricted access, hooked up to a complex array of life support systems, the constant rhythm of the ventilator a stark reminder of her fragile hold on life. stepping out of the Orr's suite into the sterile quiet of the recovery area. Evelyn felt the exhaustion hit her with full force. Her body ached. Her mind was buzzing with adrenaline, unanswered questions, and a growing sense of dread. She found Liam and Victor Dubois in the waiting area, looking like specters of their former selves. Victor Dubois, the formidable industrialist, looked utterly spent, the mask of control cracking to reveal a man grappling with profound fear and grief, lines etched deep into his face. Liam looked hollow-eyed, his earlier panic replaced by a raw, desperate despair that went bone-deep, sitting slumped in a chair, head in his hands. Evelyn delivered the post-operative report, her voice calm and professional, focusing on the medical facts of the surgery's success in stabilizing the spine, but reiterating the severity of the brain injury and the grim, uncertain prognosis. She deliberately omitted the unsettling incident with the suspicious man on the floor, not wanting to cause panic, but needing to speak to Detective Miller privately. Victor Dubois listened intently, asking sharp, focused questions about recovery protocols, ventilation, and monitoring, his mind still operating on some level despite the emotional toll. Liam, however, seemed lost in a daze, clinging only to the fragile fact that Celeste had survived the surgery. "She's alive," he repeated, a fragile whisper of hope in the sterile air. He slowly rose and walked towards Evelyn, his movements stiff with exhaustion and tension. His eyes, red-rimmed and bloodshot, were filled with a complex mixture of gratitude, regret, and a raw, dawning vulnerability that was disarming to witness. "Thank you, Evelyn. My God, thank you. You saved her life." Evelyn met his gaze, her own expression carefully neutral, trying to maintain her professional distance despite the rush of complex emotions seeing him like this evoked. "We did our best, Liam. She's in the ICU now. We'll be monitoring her minute by minute." "I know," he said, running a hand through his already messy hair. He hesitated, then lowered his voice, leaning closer, his gaze darting around as if checking for eavesdroppers, the paranoia evident in his eyes. "Evelyn, the police, and my own security, they think this is about Phoenix Technologies. The acquisition is in its final stages. It's a multi-billion-dollar deal, and Phoenix has proprietary tech, groundbreaking AI, incredibly sensitive data that powerful people, powerful organizations want to control or bury." Evelyn felt a prickle of unease, a growing sense that this went deeper than even the cutthroat corporate world Liam inhabited. Phoenix Technologies? What kind of data would be worth this level of violence? A professional hit. Cutting-edge AI protocols, predictive analysis algorithms that can model everything from stock markets to geopolitical shifts, secure communication tech that's virtually unhackable. Liam explained, his voice urgent, tense, the corporate jargon sounding chilling in the context of attempted murder. Stuff that could give a company or a country a massive strategic advantage. My head of security, Mark, he's been digging. He thinks it's one of the international organizations we outbid. They don't play by the rules. They're ruthless, and they stand to lose a multi-billion-dollar advantage. Maybe more if this deal goes through. And you think they targeted Celeste to stop the deal? To get to you? Evelyn asked, the cold, brutal logic of it chilling her. "It's the only thing that makes sense in this insane situation," Liam said, his voice tight with desperation, his eyes scanning the hallway. "She's my wife. Public figure. Easy target to send a message. Or to leverage me into backing out of the deal. A clear warning." He paused, his brow furrowed in confusion, a new thought clouding his features. But Celeste had absolutely no involvement in Phoenix. No access to any sensitive information. She wouldn't even understand half of it. It feels overly complicated if it's just about the data or leverage. Unless, his voice trailed off, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrible thought that seemed to take root and spread like a poison. Unless they thought she did know something, or had something besides leverage. A chilling possibility struck Evelyn, a thought that added another layer of complexity and danger to the already tangled situation. What if the attack wasn't solely about the Phoenix deal, or even leveraging Liam? What if Celeste herself was perceived as a threat for another reason entirely? What if it wasn't about leverage? Evelyn asked, her voice low, pushing the thought forward. What if Celeste herself was seen as a threat? Not because of the deal, but for another, more personal reason. Liam looked at her, confused, then dismissive. Celeste? A threat? Evelyn, what are you talking about? Celeste doesn't have enemies. She's gentle, involved in charities. She wouldn't be a threat to anyone. His gaze lingered on her, a flicker of the past in his eyes. Besides, what reason could there possibly be? Before he could finish, Detective Miller approached, holding a plastic evidence bag. He looked tired, lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes, but his gaze was sharp and focused, missing nothing, taking in the tense exchange between Evelyn and Liam. Mr. Vance, Mr. Du Bois, he began, his tone serious, drawing their attention away from their conversation. We've been processing the vehicle debris at the impound lot, going through everything meticulously. Found something unusual tangled in the wreckage. Could be significant. He held up the plastic evidence bag containing a small, tarnished silver locket, its chain broken, the metal scratched and dented from the impact and the subsequent recovery efforts, but intact. Liam's eyes widened in immediate recognition. That's Celeste's. She always wore it, since before we were married. She said it was a family heirloom. Victor Du Bois visibly stiffened, his gaze fixing on the locket with an intense, almost fearful concentration that went beyond simple recognition or parental concern. A muscle twitched uncontrollably in his jaw, his eyes darting towards Liam, then quickly away, a subtle but telling sign of deep unease. "Did she ever tell you what was inside, Mr. Vance?" the detective asked, his gaze sharp and probing, observing the subtle, telling reactions of both men. He sensed he was on the verge of uncovering something crucial. Liam frowned, thinking back, a cloud of confused memory passing over his face. No, not really. She was very private about it. Said it was important to her. Something about family, about her mother's side. Evelyn, who had been listening intently, felt that familiar, insistent pull again, stronger this time, demanding her attention. The locket, the intricate, almost floral engraving on its surface. It wasn't just familiar, it was that specific pattern, a motif she had seen before, imprinted in her memory from a time she had tried to forget. Years ago, in Liam's childhood home, a small, carved wooden box on a dresser in what had been his mother's room. The pattern was distinctive, almost like a personal signature. Eleanor Vance, Liam's mother. "May I see that, detective?" she asked, stepping forward, her voice steady despite the rapid beat of her heart and the growing sense of dread. Miller handed her the bag. Evelyn took it, her fingers tracing the familiar pattern through the plastic. It was undeniable. Eleanor Vance's motif. But why would Celeste Du Bois, the Du Bois heiress, Liam's wife, have a locket with Eleanor Vance's personal engraving? It made no sense. Unless she turned the locket in her hand, searching for a clasp, a way to open it. She found a tiny, almost invisible button seamlessly integrated into the intricate design near the hinge. Pressing it gently, the locket sprang open with a soft, almost inaudible metallic click, revealing its contents. Inside, nestled on faded, discolored velvet that had once been vibrant, were two small, aged photographs. The first, a tiny portrait of a young woman, beautiful and kind-eyed, with a gentle smile, her hair styled in soft waves that spoke of decades past. Her face was unknown to Evelyn, yet held a warmth that seemed to radiate from the faded image, a ghost from another time. The second photograph made Evelyn's breath catch in her throat and sent a wave of icy nausea through her. It was a baby, a cherubic infant with a shock of dark hair, wide, intelligent eyes, and features that were startlingly, undeniably familiar. Liam leaned closer, his voice tight with urgency and confusion, peering into the locket's tiny, opened interior. "What is it, Evelyn? Who are they? What's in the locket?" Evelyn's hand trembled visibly as she held the locket open. She looked from the baby's face in the photo to Liam's face, then back. The resemblance was profound, undeniable. The eyes, the curve of the lips, the little chin, the way the dark hair curled at the temple. It was him, a baby version of the man standing beside her, his face a mask of confusion and desperate curiosity. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant hum of the ER's machinery. "This baby, Liam, this is you." Liam snatched the locket from her hand, staring at the baby photo, his face draining of color, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. He looked at the photo of the young woman, then back at the baby photo, then back at the woman, confusion warring with a dawning, terrible suspicion forming in his eyes. He didn't recognize the woman, but the baby. "Me?" he stammered, his voice shaking. "How? And the woman? Who is she?" "Celeste, she never showed me this. This makes no sense." Victor Dubois had moved closer, his face a mask of utter dread, his eyes wide with a dawning horror that mirrored Liam's shock, but was deeper, older, rooted in long-buried fear. He stared at the locket, at the photos, then at Liam, his usual imposing presence shrinking, replaced by a visible tremor that shook his entire frame. He looked like a man who had just seen his darkest secret brought into the harsh light of day. Detective Miller's gaze was sharp, fixed intently on the two men, sensing the tectonic shift beneath the surface, the emotional earthquake that was just beginning. "Mr. Dubois," he said, his voice low and steady, cutting through the thick, suffocating tension in the hallway, his tone indicating he suspected he already knew the answer. "Do you recognize the woman in that photograph?" Victor Dubois flinched violently as if struck. He avoided Liam's gaze, his eyes darting around desperately, seeking an escape route that didn't exist in the confines of the hospital hallway. His silence stretched, long and heavy, filled only by the frantic beeping of distant monitors and the shallow, ragged breaths of the men before him. It was a long time ago. He finally managed, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper, the words wrenched from him, laden with a lifetime of concealed truth. Before I married Genevieve. Before Celeste's mother." "Before Celeste's mother?" Miller pressed, his voice firm, relentless, sensing he was on the verge of breaking open a deep, potentially dangerous secret. "Mr. Dubois was this woman, Eleanor Vance." The name ripped through the air, a chilling confirmation. Liam froze, his head snapping up, his eyes locking onto Victor Dubois, the earlier confusion replaced by a chilling, terrible certainty that sent a shiver down Evelyn's spine. Eleanor Vance, his mother, the pattern on the locket, the baby photo of him. It all clicked into place with a horrifying finality. Victor Dubois recoiled, his face twisting in a mixture of fear, desperation, and futile denial. His eyes were wide, looking from Miller to Evelyn, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him in real time. How do you know that name?" he stammered, his voice trembling. "Eleanor Vance was Liam's mother," Evelyn stated, her voice clear and steady despite the cold dread settling deeper in her stomach. The locket with Eleanor's personal motif, containing a baby photo of Liam and a photo of Eleanor herself. It made a terrible, undeniable sense. She had seen that motif before, on Eleanor's art, on her belongings. It was unique, and this baby photo in the locket is of Liam. The woman in the other photo is Eleanor Vance. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum where the sounds of the hospital had been moments before, replaced by the deafening roar of a devastating truth. Liam stared at the locket, at the photos, then at Victor Dubois, his face a mask of utter, gut-wrenching horror, disbelief, and a dawning rage so profound it was terrifying to witness. "Eleanor Vance," Victor Dubois whispered again, the name a painful ghost from a buried past that had just clawed its way back into the harsh light of the present. "Yes, I knew her. Years ago. A brief connection. Before I met Genevieve. It was a mistake. We thought it was over. Forgotten. Never spoken of." He looked at Liam, a terrible, desperate confession in his eyes, a lifetime of lies culminating in this single, devastating moment. she never told me she was pregnant. Not until much later. By then, I was already married to Genevieve. For the family, the reputation, the secret had to be kept. For decades. Forgotten. Liam roared, his voice raw with anguish and rage, echoing down the hallway and drawing the shocked attention of staff and other waiting families. His composure was completely shattered, his voice escalating to a shout of pure pain and fury. A brief connection? My mother? And you knew? All this time? Celeste. Celeste is my sister. He rounded on Victor Du Bois, his voice trembling with the force of his shock, his betrayal, his rage, the realization of the grotesque manipulation that had defined his life. You knew Celeste was my half-sister, and you orchestrated our marriage? You used us, both of us, for the merger? For the power of the Du Bois empire? You married your own son to his half-sister to consolidate your fortune? Victor Du Bois stumbled back, raising a trembling hand as if to ward off a physical blow, his face contorted with fear and a desperate, futile attempt to justify decades of lies. It was necessary for the family. The scandal, it would have destroyed everything. Genevieve, she never knew. We kept it buried. For the legacy, for decades. It was for the business. The future. Detective Miller stepped between them, his voice firm, cutting through the emotional explosion, reasserting control over the volatile situation. Mr. Vance, Mr. Du Bois, please. This is a major development. It fundamentally changes the entire motive for the attack. It wasn't just about the Phoenix deal, was it? Mr. Du Bois, this secret, this is the motive. Keeping this buried. The inheritance. The potential scandal. Celeste found out, didn't she? And she was going to expose you. Or someone. Liam stared at Victor Du Bois, his eyes burning with a cold, hard fury Evelyn had never seen before, a chilling intensity that replaced the raw anguish. She found the locket. She put it together. She realized who I was, and who you were. She was going to reveal the truth about you, about us. And you tried to kill your own daughter to stop her. Victor Du Bois gasped, stumbling back, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a genuine terror that seemed to override even his fear of exposure, a primal fear for his life. No, I swear, Liam, I didn't orchestrate that attack. I would never harm Celeste. She is my daughter. That wasn't me. I swear on Genevieve's grave. Someone else must have known. Someone else must have done this. Evelyn watched, her mind reeling, processing the grotesque layers of deceit, manipulation, and devastating consequences. The man who had ended her marriage for cold, strategic gain had built his new life, his second marriage, on a foundation of horrifying family secrets, a foundation of incestuous unions orchestrated for power and profit. And Celeste, the woman who had replaced her, was a victim of the very ambition and lies that had destroyed Evelyn's life, only on a far more twisted and tragic scale. The locket, Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the nausea churning in her stomach, her medical detachment warring with the human horror of the situation, her mind racing, trying to understand the implications for Celeste, for all of them. Celeste had the locket. With the pictures. She found the proof. She must have realized who Liam was. And who you were, Mr. Du Bois. But how did she get it? And when? If Celeste found the locket recently, after her mother passed, and she was planning to expose the secret, who would find out about her plans? Who stood to gain? Victor Du Bois looked at the locket in Evelyn's hand, his eyes filled with a desperate regret and fear, shaking his head slightly. I don't know how she got it. It must have been among Genevieve's things. My wife, Celeste's mother. She kept so many old papers, mementos from her family. Celeste must have found it after Genevieve passed away. She never said anything to me about finding it. Never showed me the locket. I swear, I didn't know she knew. A chilling thought struck Evelyn, a possibility that added another layer of complexity and danger to the already tangled situation. If Victor Du Bois wasn't the direct orchestrator of the hit, but someone else was trying to keep the secret buried or exploit it, and that someone knew Celeste had the locket, knew she was planning to reveal the truth, and now the secret was out here in the hospital, her gaze swept the busy ER floor again, seeing it through new, fearful eyes. The usual faces of staff were present, a comforting rhythm of familiar movements and dedicated purpose. But interspersed were the burly forms of Victor Dubois's private security, talking quietly amongst themselves, their eyes constantly scanning, their presence a physical manifestation of the danger surrounding the Dubois family. And in the corner, near a bank of vending machines, sipping a coffee, she noticed him again. The man she had seen earlier, asking suspicious questions about patient transfers. Plain clothes, nondescript, blending in, but his eyes were scanning the room with an intensity that felt too deliberate, too focused, too cold. When he caught her eye this time, he didn't look away. His gaze held hers for a second too long before he turned and casually walked towards the main exit, disappearing into the stream of people leaving the hospital, a predator blending back into the concrete jungle. A wave of cold dread washed over Evelyn, settling deep in her bones. The danger wasn't over. It wasn't contained to the overpass wreckage or the secrets of the past. It was here, inside the hospital walls. "Detective," she said, her voice low and urgent, drawing Miller's attention, pointing subtly towards the main exit the man had just used. That man, the one asking questions earlier. He was just watching us again, near the vending machines. He left moments ago. He's not staff. He's not with Dubois' security. Miller followed her gaze, his expression tightening as he saw the direction the man had taken. He quickly spoke into his radio. "All units, be advised. Suspicious male just exited main lobby. Dark jacket, mid-40s, average build, nondescript. Possible suspect from earlier reports. Monitor exits, check security footage now." He looked back at Evelyn, his eyes sharp, acknowledging her observation. "Good catch, Dr. Reed. We'll pull the security footage. But you're right. If someone tried to silence Ms. Dubois because of this secret, and they think she might have told someone, or the secret is getting out now because of this crash and investigation, this hospital just became ground zero for a very dangerous situation." As additional police officers arrived to formally escort a visibly shattered Liam and a pale, trembling Victor Dubois away for intensive questioning, the air in the hallway crackled with unspoken tension. Liam paused before leaving, his gaze locking with Evelyn's. His eyes were filled with a torrent of emotions. Horror at the truth of his identity, pain for Celeste, a raw, dawning grief for his mother, regret for their past, and a terrifying understanding of the twisted forces that had shaped his life and brought him to this point. The public betrayal of their marriage, the reason for Evelyn's pain. It seemed almost insignificant now compared to the grotesque reality of his own identity and family history, a reality that had just exploded into his life, destroying everything he thought he knew, everything he had built. He didn't speak, but his gaze conveyed a profound, life-altering realization, a silent acknowledgement of the dark, complex web that now bound them together again, inextricably linked by a deadly secret and the woman lying unconscious upstairs. Evelyn stood in the hallway, the plastic evidence bag containing the locket feeling impossibly heavy and cold in her hand. It was more than just an heirloom. It was a tangible piece of a devastating secret, a key that had unlocked a Pandora's box of lies, ambition, and attempted murder. She looked up towards the elevator that led to the ICU floors. Celeste Dubois lay unconscious, her life hanging by a thread, a victim of a conspiracy rooted in a decades-old lie. The sterile, familiar air of the ER, usually a source of comfort in its predictability, now felt fundamentally unsafe. If the people behind this attack were ruthless enough to target Celeste, and the secret was now exposed because of this crash and the locket, who else was in danger? Evelyn, holding the locket, connected to Liam's past, Celeste's present, and Victor Dubois's terrible secret, felt a chilling certainty that she was no longer merely a witness. The woman who had been discarded, deemed irrelevant to the world of power, was now holding a critical piece of evidence, a key to a truth that could bring down empires and expose the rot at the heart of the city's elite. The forces that had tried to silence Celeste were likely still out there, desperate to keep their secrets buried. The fight for Celeste's life as a patient was ongoing, minute by minute, a medical battle against devastating injuries. But down here and upstairs in the secured ICU, a different kind of battle was just beginning, a battle against hidden, deadly forces willing to kill to keep their secrets buried. And Evelyn was now caught squarely in the crossfire, her past, her present, and her future colliding in the most dangerous way imaginable. The night was giving way to a false dawn, painting the sky in pale hues, but the true threat was no longer distant. It was lurking in the shadows of her own hospital, watching, waiting, the sterile walls no longer feeling like a fortress, but a cage. The plastic evidence bag felt slick and cold in Evelyn's hand, a flimsy barrier between her and the weight of the tarnished silver locket within. It was more than metal and faded photographs. It was a key that had just unlocked a Pandora's box of lies, ambition, and attempted murder. The air in the hallway, moments ago thick with the raw emotion of Liam's and Victor Dubois's shattering confrontation, now felt thin, charged with a new, insidious dread. The familiar sounds of the ER, the distant beeping, the murmur of voices, the rhythmic whoosh of the automatic doors, seemed underscored by a low, ominous hum, a warning of unseen danger. Victor Dubois's private security detail, imposing figures in dark suits, lingered near the elevators, their eyes scanning the floor with a vigilance that suddenly felt less like protection and more like surveillance. And the man near the vending machines, the nondescript figure who had been watching, asking questions, and who had just calmly walked away when spotted. He wasn't just curious. He was a threat, and he knew who knew. Liam and Victor Dubois were being escorted away by Detective Miller and additional officers, their figures receding down the hallway. A CEO stripped of his power and a patriarch stripped of his dignity, both reeling from a truth that had just exploded into their lives. Liam's parting gaze, locking with Evelyn's, spoke volumes. Horror, pain, a terrible understanding, and perhaps a silent plea for connection in a world that had just been turned upside down. Evelyn stood frozen, the locket in her hand, the weight of its secret pressing down on her. Celeste Dubois lay unconscious upstairs, her life hanging by a thread, a victim of a conspiracy born from a decades-old lie. And Evelyn, the woman who had been discarded, was now holding the key to that lie. The sterile walls of the hospital, her fortress, suddenly felt like a cage. Detective Miller returned, his expression grim, his eyes sharp and focused. "Dr. Reed," he said, his voice low and urgent, looking at the locket. "This changes everything. The Phoenix deal might be a layer, but this is the core motive. Inheritance. Scandal. The potential implosion of two empires. Someone wanted that secret to stay buried, and Celeste somehow became a threat." He glanced towards the main exit. "We're checking security footage, tracing that guy. But you're right. If he's connected to this, and he saw you with the locket, you could be in danger." Evelyn didn't need him to tell her. The cold dread in her stomach was a physical manifestation of the threat. "Celeste had this locket," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "with a picture of Liam as a baby and a picture of his mother, Eleanor Vance. The locket itself has Eleanor Vance's personal motif engraved on it. It wasn't just a random heirloom." Miller's eyes narrowed. "Eleanor Vance's personal motif? How do you know that, Dr. Reed?" Evelyn hesitated. Revealing her past connection to Liam felt exposed. But this was life and death. I was married to Liam Vance for 6 years," she said, the words feeling strange and heavy in this context. "I saw that motif before, on things that belonged to his mother, in his childhood home." Miller absorbed this information, his expression shifting from professional curiosity to a more complex assessment. He looked at Evelyn, seeing not just the surgeon, but the woman with a history intertwined with the very people at the center of his investigation. "All right, Dr. Reed," he said slowly, "this puts you in a unique position. You understand these people's world, their history, better than anyone else here. And you found the locket. You recognized the connection." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "Frankly, you might be safer if you cooperate with me." Stay where I can keep an eye on you. Safer? Evelyn almost laughed. Her life had been ripped apart by these people's world once before. Now it was crashing in her again, bringing violence and danger. But running wouldn't help. She was already involved. And there was Celeste upstairs, a patient she had fought to save, a woman caught in a horrifying secret. "What do you need me to do?" Evelyn asked, her voice firming, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't be a victim this time. "First," Miller said, gesturing to the locket, "this goes into official evidence. But we need to understand its journey. How did Celeste get this locket?" Victor Dubois says he didn't know she had it. Genevieve, Celeste's mother, she kept old things. Maybe it was among her belongings? Or did Celeste find it somewhere else? Did she find something else along with it? A letter? A diary entry? Something that explained the photos? Evelyn thought of Victor Dubois's desperate denial, his claim that Genevieve never knew about Eleanor Vance or Liam. If Genevieve had inherited the locket from her own family, and it contained a picture of Eleanor Vance and baby Liam, surely she would have questioned it, unless Genevieve herself was somehow connected or didn't know what she had. Victor Dubois said Genevieve kept many old things. Evelyn mused aloud. Perhaps it was in a box, something overlooked after Genevieve's death. Celeste might have been going through her mother's belongings recently and stumbled upon it. "That's a possibility," Miller conceded. "We'll need to talk to anyone who helped Celeste go through her mother's things. Any family friends, estate lawyers, house staff." He looked back at Evelyn. In Victor Dubois's story about Eleanor Vance, he says it was a brief, regrettable connection, that she never told him about the pregnancy until after he was married. Does that sound plausible based on what you know of their world? Of him? Evelyn considered Victor Dubois, a man who valued legacy, control, reputation above all else. Concealing a child born out of wedlock, especially if the mother wasn't from their social standing, fit perfectly with his character. And Eleanor Vance. Liam had rarely spoken of his mother, only that she was an artist, quiet, died when he was young. It was a part of his life he seemed to keep separate. It sounds consistent with the kind of secret someone like Victor Dubois would bury, Evelyn said slowly. And Eleanor Vance, from what little I know, she wasn't part of their social circle. Keeping her and Liam hidden would have been strategic. Ruthless, but strategic. Miller nodded grimly. Strategic. And now that strategy is blowing up in his face. Or maybe someone else's face. Who else knew about Eleanor Vance and Victor Dubois? Maybe someone who used that information? Someone who saw an opportunity when Celeste found the locket? The thought sent a fresh wave of unease through Evelyn. A secret this big, kept for decades. Surely someone else must have suspected? A family member? A trusted employee? A rival who dug for dirt? Mr. Dubois's private security detail, Evelyn said, looking towards the lingering men in dark suits. They were talking quietly earlier. They seemed very focused. And that man near the vending machines. "We're looking into them," Miller confirmed. Dubois's security chief is en route. But they work for him. Their loyalty is to the Dubois family, or maybe just to Victor Dubois. They might not be involved in the hit, but they might be here to control access to Celeste, to control information, to manage this scandal. He paused, his eyes meeting Evelyn's, a shared understanding passing between them. And that man, he didn't look like security. He looked like someone who didn't want to be seen. Just then, a call came over Miller's radio. "Detective, footage from a main lobby is up. We got a clean shot of the suspicious male leaving the hospital. Running facial recognition now." Miller acknowledged the call. "All right, Dr. Reed. For now, I need you to check on your other patients. But stay on this floor, near the main ER. I'll have uniforms keeping an eye out. And don't talk about this to anyone. Not the other staff, not even the Dubois security detail. Assume anyone could be involved." Evelyn nodded, the weight of his words pressing down on her. Trust no one, not in her own hospital. The place that had been her sanctuary now felt like a potential trap. She spent the next hour going through the motions, checking on her other patients from the pile-up, performing follow-up exams, giving orders. But her mind was racing, constantly replaying the events of the night. Liam's face as he realized the truth. Victor Dubois's terror. the locket in her hand, the cold, assessing gaze of the man near the vending machines. She finished her rounds and made her way back towards the main ER area, her senses on high alert. The atmosphere felt tighter, more watchful. The Du Bois security men were still there, their presence a silent, unsettling reminder of the danger. Miller found her near the nurse's station, his face grim. "We got an ID on the guy from the footage. He's a known associate of a private security firm called Aegis Solutions. They specialize in corporate espionage, competitive intelligence, and wet work if the price is right. They've been linked to less than reputable organizations globally." The kind Liam Vance described being outbid on the Phoenix deal. Aegis Solutions. The name sounded sterile, efficient, deadly. "So it is about the Phoenix deal?" Evelyn asked, a knot tightening in her stomach. "Maybe," Miller said, his brow furrowed. "Or maybe someone hired them because they found out about the secret, and the Phoenix deal was a convenient cover story. Aegis has a reputation for being hired by multiple parties, sometimes even working both sides." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "The address associated with the guy is a dead end. We're tracing other known associates. But his presence here, it confirms the threat is active. And it's here." Suddenly, a flurry of activity erupted near the elevators leading to the ICU. Shouting voices, the hurried sound of footsteps. A nurse came running down the hallway, her face pale with panic. "ICU. Code blue in Ms. Du Bois's room. Security breach." Evelyn and Miller exchanged a look of shared horror. They were making a move. "Go!" Miller yelled to Evelyn, already running towards the elevators, radio in hand. "Get upstairs. She's your patient. I'll get backup. Du Bois's security, with me." Evelyn sprinted towards the elevators, her exhaustion forgotten, adrenaline flooding her system. Security breach. Celeste. They were trying to finish the job. She reached the elevators, slamming the call button repeatedly, her heart pounding. Du Bois's security guards were already piling into one car, Miller into another, barking orders into his radio. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. As the doors finally opened on the ICU floor, the scene was chaotic. Nurses and doctors were scrambling, security guards were grappling with two figures near Celeste's room, and the piercing, urgent beeping of a code blue resounded from inside. Evelyn burst into the room. Celeste's ventilator alarm was screaming, monitors flatlining. Her medical team was already there, starting compressions, administering drugs. Evelyn rushed to the bedside, assessing the situation with a surgeon's trained eye. The ventilator tubing had been tampered with. Disconnected, subtly enough to look like an accidental disconnection, but with a small, almost invisible cut near the connector. A deliberate act. "They cut the tubing," Evelyn yelled, her voice cutting through the urgency. "It wasn't just disconnected. Get new tubing. Now." As the nurses scrambled, Evelyn joined the code, performing compressions, her mind racing. They were trying to kill Celeste, here, in her hospital, in the ICU. And Aegis Solutions was involved. Corporate espionage, wet work. Outside the room, she heard the sounds of a struggle, of Miller shouting orders, of Victor Du Bois's security guards apprehending the two intruders. But inside, the fight was for Celeste's life, a medical battle against a deliberate attack. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. They re-established the airway with new tubing, administered epinephrine, continued compressions. On the monitor, a weak, fragile rhythm flickered, then strengthened. "Pulse check," Evelyn called out. A moment of tense silence. "We have a pulse." A collective sigh of relief, quickly stifled. Celeste was back, but still teetering on the edge. Miller entered the room, his face grim, but relieved to see the medical team had stabilized her. His clothes were slightly disheveled, a cut on his cheek. "We got him," he reported, his voice strained. Two men, Aegis Solutions operatives, found a silenced pistol on one, disguised scalpel on the other. He looked at Evelyn. They were here to make sure she didn't wake up, or maybe retrieve something. Like the locket. Did Ms. Du Bois have anything else with her? Anything unusual? Evelyn shook her head. "Nothing I saw, detective. Just her personal effects bagged up downstairs." We'll need to go through those with a fine-tooth comb, Miller said, looking back at the still unconscious Celeste. And we need to question those, too. Find out who sent them, and why they thought Celeste was a threat. He looked at Evelyn, a new respect in his eyes. Good call on that guy downstairs, Doctor. You save her life. Again, the code was over, but the tension remained, amplified by the knowledge that the threat was real, and it was close. Hospital security on the ICU floor was quadrupled. Du Bois's security detail remained vigilant. Evelyn stayed by Celeste's bedside for a while, monitoring her vitals, the rhythm of the ventilator a constant reminder of the battle they were fighting. Later that morning, Evelyn was able to get a brief moment alone with Liam. He looked even worse than before, the shock of Celeste's true identity compounded by the attempted attack on her life. He was sitting in the quiet family room on the ICU floor, head in his hands. Evelyn sat down beside him. "Liam," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes raw. "Evelyn, they tried to kill her. Here, in the hospital." His voice was a broken whisper. "We stopped them," Evelyn said firmly. "She's stable for now." He ran a shaky hand through his hair. "Aegis Solutions. Miller said they're linked to the people we outbid on Phoenix. But why kill Celeste? Just to stop the deal? It doesn't make sense. There are other ways. What if it wasn't just the deal, Liam?" Evelyn said, echoing her earlier thought. "What if it was about the secret? What if the people you outbid somehow found out about Victor and your mother? Found out Celeste had proof in the locket, and they decided to use it? To eliminate Celeste, frame Victor Du Bois, cause chaos for Vance Corp and Du Bois Industries? Maybe weaken both empires so they could swoop in?" Liam stared at her, the implications dawning on his face, horrifying in their complexity. "You think they knew about the secret and used that as the reason to kill her?" "It fits," Evelyn said grimly. "Celeste finds the locket. Perhaps she starts asking questions. Maybe someone overhears her, or she confides in the wrong person. The people who want to stop the Phoenix deal hear about this massive, explosive secret at the heart of the Du Bois/Vance alliance. They see an opportunity. Eliminate Celeste, blame Victor, cause a scandal that cripples both companies, and clear the way for them to get the Phoenix tech or consolidate power." Liam buried his face in his hands again. "My God, my whole life a lie, a strategic play. And Celeste, she was just caught in the middle of a secret that wasn't even hers to keep. But she had the locket," Evelyn reminded him. "She had the proof. That's why she became a target." She paused, then asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Liam, did Celeste ever seem different lately? Worried? Asking unusual questions? Did she ever mention going through her mother's old things?" Liam lifted his head, thinking hard. She was a bit preoccupied lately. Distant sometimes. Said she was dealing with family matters. I assumed it was about managing some of her mother's estates, paperwork. She inherited a lot when Genevieve passed away a few years ago." He looked at Evelyn, his eyes searching. "She never mentioned finding anything specific. Nothing like a locket. But she did mention a large storage unit, full of her mother's old belongings. Papers, furniture, mementos. She was planning to finally go through it properly. A storage unit, full of Genevieve Du Bois's old things. That's where Celeste likely found the locket. And perhaps other things. Letters? Diaries? Anything that explained the photo of Eleanor Vance and baby Liam. We need to tell Miller about the storage unit," Evelyn said urgently. "It might contain more answers, more proof, or maybe even explain how Celeste found the locket and what she learned." Miller acted quickly on the information. The storage unit associated with Genevieve Du Bois's estate was located and secured. Inside, among countless boxes of heirlooms and forgotten belongings, they found more. Not just the locket's twin, confirming it was part of Genevieve's collection, but bundles of old letters tied with ribbon. Letters from Eleanor Vance to Genevieve Du Bois, dated years before Genevieve married Victor. The letters spoke of a shared secret, a burden, a promise made to protect a child from scandal. They didn't explicitly state that Liam was Victor's son, but they spoke of a beautiful baby boy and his father's impossible position, and Genevieve's promise to Eleanor that she would ensure the boy was cared for. Eve. In from a distance, if anything happened to Eleanor. Genevieve Du Bois, the woman Victor married, Celeste's mother, had known. She had known about Eleanor and Liam, and she had kept the secret, perhaps even helping Eleanor from afar, bound by a promise made years ago. The revelation that Genevieve had known and actively participated in keeping the secret added another layer of betrayal to Liam's pain and shattered any remaining notion that Celeste's mother was an innocent bystander. It also suggested that the locket wasn't just found. It might have been deliberately given to Celeste by Genevieve, perhaps as a clue or a burden before she died. Miller's investigation, now armed with the letters and the two captured Aegis operatives, began to unravel the conspiracy. The operatives were professional, giving up little, but their secure communication devices yielded encrypted messages. The messages weren't directly from Victor Du Bois. They pointed towards a complex network involving shell corporations, offshore accounts, and anonymous handlers. However, under intense pressure, one of the operatives, facing severe charges and potential extradition, began to talk. He confirmed they were hired by a third party, not directly linked to Du Bois or Vance, but connected to the organization's outbid on the Phoenix deal. He confirmed their primary objective was to prevent the Phoenix acquisition by any means necessary. Their secondary objective, upon discovering the explosive secret about Liam and Celeste through their intelligence gathering on Du Bois and Vance, standard practice when targeting major companies, was to use it to eliminate Celeste, who had the locket/proof and was seen as a growing liability. Frame Victor Du Bois for the murder and the incestuous marriage scandal, cause a catastrophic implosion of both Vance Corp and Du Bois Industries, thereby clearing the way for their employers to seize control of the market and perhaps even get their hands on the Phoenix tech in the ensuing chaos. Celeste finding the locket and potentially talking about it had simply accelerated their timeline and given them a perfect cover story. A desperate father trying to silence his daughter. The mastermind wasn't Victor Du Bois, though his secret had provided the motive. It was a ruthless, external force that had discovered and exploited the devastating truth. Victor Du Bois, consumed by his need to protect his legacy, his fear of scandal, and perhaps even a twisted sense of duty to the hidden son he never acknowledged, had created the perfect weapon for his enemies to use against him. In the ICU, Celeste's condition remained critical, stable, but unchanged. Days turned into a week. Evelyn continued her demanding schedule, but she spent any free moment on the ICU floor, drawn to Celeste's bedside, bound by the medical fight and the dark secret that had brought them all together. Liam was a constant, quiet presence in the ICU waiting area, a man haunted by the truth of his life, navigating the complex, painful reality of his relationship with Celeste, his sister, his wife. Their interactions were strained, fragile. Old resentments and new horrors mingled. But there was also a hesitant, shared understanding, a bond forged in crisis and shared trauma. They talked about Celeste, about the past, about the terrible weight of Victor Du Bois's secret. Liam, stripped of his corporate arrogance, showed Evelyn a vulnerability she hadn't seen in years. He spoke about his mother, Eleanor, piecing together fragments of memory with the devastating clarity provided by the letters. He spoke about the loneliness of his childhood, the distant father, Victor, who was present but emotionally unavailable, the stepmother, Genevieve, who was kind but held a sadness he couldn't understand. Now, the pieces fit, forming a picture of a life built on deliberate deception. Victor Du Bois, under intense pressure from Miller and facing ruin, eventually confessed the bare bones of his affair with Eleanor Vance and the subsequent secret. He maintained his innocence in the attack on Celeste, his terror seeming genuine. He confirmed Genevieve had known, that she had helped Eleanor, acting as a quiet conduit, occasionally sending support, bound by a promise made to Eleanor years before. He claimed he hadn't known Celeste had the locket or knew the truth until the ER hallway. His world was collapsing. The impending scandal, the criminal investigation, the shattered trust of his son, Liam, and his fight for his daughter's, Celeste's, life. The Aegis operative's confessions, combined with the evidence from the storage unit and Miller's investigation, led to the identification and apprehension of the external masterminds, a shadowy group linked to a rival international consortium. The Phoenix acquisition was halted, tangled in the legal and criminal fallout of the attempted assassination and the explosive scandal. Celeste remained in the coma. Her medical team worked tirelessly, but the neurological damage was severe. Days turned into weeks, the beeping of the monitors a constant, agonizing soundtrack. Evelyn, exhausted but relentless, continued to oversee her care, a professional duty intertwined with a strange, complex connection to the woman who had unknowingly been her rival and was now a fellow victim of Victor Du Bois's secrets and Liam's twisted lineage. One quiet afternoon, weeks after the crash, something changed. Evelyn was examining Celeste, performing a routine neurological check. As she gently touched Celeste's hand, she felt a slight pressure, a faint squeeze of her fingers. Evelyn froze, her heart leaping. "Celeste!" She repeated the stimulus, a gentle touch, a soft word. Again, a faint, almost imperceptible squeeze. It was minimal, ambiguous, but it was something. A flicker of response in the vast, silent landscape of her coma. Hope, fragile and uncertain, entered the room. Liam was called immediately. He sat by Celeste's bedside, holding her hand, talking to her softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Sister, wife." The words were impossibly intertwined. Evelyn watched him, a complex mix of emotions swirling within her. Pity for him, yes, but also a grudging respect for how he was handling the devastating truth. And beneath it all, a faint, lingering echo of the man she had loved, now irrevocably changed by the fire he had walked through. The fight for Celeste Du Bois was far from over. The medical battle continued, minute by minute. The legal and corporate fallout of the conspiracy and the revealed secret would take years to untangle. Victor Du Bois faced criminal charges and the destruction of his legacy. Liam faced the public humiliation, the legal battles, and the daunting task of rebuilding his life and Vance Corp amidst the ruins of his family secrets. And Evelyn, she remained Dr. Evelyn Reed, the trauma surgeon, the woman who had saved lives and uncovered a deadly truth. Her life was irrevocably changed, once again tangled with the world of Liam Vance and the dark consequences of ambition and hidden lies. The sterile walls of the hospital no longer felt like a cage, but a crossroads. She had faced down the ghosts of her past and the dangers of the present. Her future, uncertain but her own, stretched before her. The locket, now evidence in a criminal case, remained a potent symbol of the secrets that could lie hidden beneath the surface and the devastating price of their exposure. The fight for truth, for justice, and for healing had just begun. Thank you for listening to this story. If you found it thrilling and engaging, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more captivating tales.